How do you keep your relationship strong and thriving when you have a new baby or children in the mix? It's a classic situation where the attention that children require can introduce distance and tension to a relationship that was perfectly fine beforehand. So how do you manage the kids and your relationship? That's what we're going to talk about today. But first, just a reminder that Relationship Alive is my offering to you so that you can have the best possible relationships in your life. If you are finding the show to be helpful, please consider a donation to ensure that we can continue. Every little bit counts, and you can choose whatever feels right to you. To make a donation, just visit neilsatin.com/support. And this week, I would like to thank Anne, Valerie, John, Kirthi, Susan, Jules, Rachel, David, Cynthia, Barrett, Molly, Julie, and Laura. Thank you all so much for your generous and, in many cases, ongoing support of Relationship Alive. If you haven't downloaded it yet, please grab my free communication guide that gives you my top 3 communication secrets that can help you have any challenging conversation and end up in a more connected, intimate place on the other end. To download the free guide, just visit neilsatin.com/relate. And the guide is a little preview of my full Secrets of Relationship Communication course, which you can find out more about and grab if you visit neilsatin.com/course, COURSE. I think that's it. Let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of Relationship Alive. This is your host, Neil Satin. I think we've either seen it happen or maybe even experienced it ourselves, that the addition of a new life, a new being to a family can create big changes. And some of those changes are amazing and wonderful and life-enhancing, and some of those changes can feel almost cataclysmic. And so we are here today to talk about how to navigate a new addition to a family, whether it be a baby or adopting an older child, or even if you've had children in your life for a while and experienced the impact of children on your relationship. We're going to talk about how to steer your couple ship in a way so that you can strengthen your relationship and strengthen with each other and with your children, and hopefully have a little bit more joy and a little less cataclysm. To have today's conversation, we have 2 very special guests. One is Kara Hoppe, who is a marriage and family therapist, and the other is Stan Tatkin, who you may be familiar with from being on the show before, the author of Wired in Love and Wired for Dating, among other books. And together they have written the book Baby Bomb, a relationship survival guide for new parents. Because as we were chatting about before this interview started, there aren't many resources to help people not just navigate what's going on with a new baby, but actually navigate how that impacts their relationship and how to have a strong relationship despite all the ways that the new addition or additions to your family might make the waters a little rocky. I don't know why I'm going with the boat metaphor today, but it's happening. Anyway, if you are interested in downloading the transcript for today's episode, you can visit neilsatin.com/baby. And Kara Hoppe and Stan Tatkin, it's a pleasure to have you here today on Relationship Alive.
Thank you, Neil.
Happy to be here.
Great. Well, we're off to a good start. So I sometimes like to do this, which is to start at the end. And in your book, Baby Bomb, which is great, by the way, you offer 10 guiding principles for how to help couples stay strong in their relationship, despite, however, having a child in their life may be impacting the relationship. And at the very last guiding principle that you have, I'm going to just read it verbatim here. I think I dog-eared the page. Guiding Principle 10. You and your partner parent and partner with sensitivity, respect, and trust. And I wanted to start there because, for one thing, I'm not even sure people necessarily nail that down before a child comes along.
Right.
And so much of getting things strengthened and resilient has to do with those very things. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about why those things are so important: sensitivity, respect, and trust, and why their absence might lead to some of the common things that people experience when a new addition actually throws things into chaos.
Yeah, Neil, I love it that you started at the end. The last guiding principle. And I immediately, when you were saying it, was thinking about the beginning of parenthood. When two people become parents, neither one of them really know what they're doing. They've never done it before. No like aunt or uncle or godparent experience speaks to that. And so they're both learning in tandem how to do this. So it's a really vulnerable experience. So having that respect and sensitivity and trust in themselves and in their partner as they learn how to do this is so critical, right? I'm thinking about like when we brought Jude home from the hospital, neither one of us knew how to burp him. And so, and it's such a simple thing, but I didn't know how to burp a baby, nobody had taught me before. And I remember like watching Charlie do it and feeling in my body, like, oh God, like fear, and like wanting to jump in, but then like pausing because I wanted to give him the respect, like he was giving me the respect to learn how to do it. And all of that like increased our participation in showing up for our son, Jude, but it also like made our relationship feel like a safer place for both of us to kind of fumble around learning how to be parents together and be witnessed as parents together. So,
yeah, so much of what you talk about in the book has to do with battling in some ways the cultural expectations that we have. And I think some of that includes this assumption that you're somehow gonna know what to do. And so I appreciate your highlighting that it's a very vulnerable act to suddenly have a child in your arms. Or if you're a step parent, to find yourself with an older child potentially in front of you and to not necessarily know what to do. There are all these ways that we're kind of fighting in internal messages that we've gotten from culture, from family, etc.
Right. Like, I mean, that idea of the maternal instinct kicking in, like, yes, and maternal instinct doesn't cover burping. It doesn't cover like putting on diapers. It doesn't necessarily cover even breastfeeding. Like all of that has to be taught like in real time, learning how to do it. Mm-hmm. And so there can be like a lot of internal pressure because of that external pressure that if I don't know what I'm doing, I'm somehow failing. And that can be exacerbated. Of course, we know like people, like partners doing that to each other and like, come here, I'll take the baby. I know how to do this. And like, just kind of cutting each other down. And what Stan and I really wanted to do with Baby Bomb was to like help people recognize the importance of supporting each other during this vulnerable experience and like how they could do that, like with really practical ways. And we just wrote the book to kind of walk people, through that journey of how to show up for their relationship that way.
So lest we make any assumptions here about what sensitivity, respect, and trust mean, can we do just kind of a quick breakdown of what you mean by sensitivity, what you mean by respect, what you mean by trust? Because we'll circle back to those principles along with the principle of circling back as we continue this conversation.
Well, you mentioned something important, that is many people go into this without prior knowledge. And while there is no study guide really for having a child or raising a child, there is a structure. And I think that there's a natural hubris to human beings going into things without predicting, planning, without thinking ahead, and having a structure and an architecture going into something, whether it's step parenting, whether it's marriage, whether it's having a child. And so people go into this without really thinking ahead. Why does the couple, like you said, have to start off with a structure where you have, in a free society, two individuals who are coming together based on conditions and terms? They're supposedly sharing power and authority, and therefore they have the same stakes, right? Same things to lose, same things to gain. And that, in any free society where there is mutuality and shared interests, and a shared purpose and a shared vision, there has to be fairness and justice. There has to be sensitivity. Otherwise, people will do bad things. So it only makes sense that the couple is starting this family, right? The couple is the constant that's running through this whole thing. Kids are passing through, right? They're being taught how to live in society and then how to go off on their own and be good citizens and so on. And the parents are supposed to be exemplars for this, right? So everything starts and ends with the couple. And if the couple is not intact, if the couple is not functioning properly according to collaborative and cooperative fairness and so on, then everything else is going to come undone, right? So we really want couples to be prepared to be a good couple. Their party is so wonderful that they're inviting this other child into their party, right? And they are ready to lead. They are ready to be parents. They are ready to show, not tell, how to do this thing called relationship. That's why it's essential that trust be there. It's the foundation of these voluntary relationships that are based on collaboration, cooperation. Without trust, people begin to do terrible things to each other. And that's what we want to avoid, right? We want a system that is operating really well with two executives that are first and foremost a couple, and that they are in a leadership position to handle whatever comes. And in this case, something quite marvelous, but very complex and very disruptive. And that is a third human being that's going to change all the roles in the couple and the duties, and that has to be predicted and prepared for.
Okay, so when we say, I'm going to just give you the quick quiz, Stan. So when we say trust, at its simplest, what do we mean? What are we trusting?
I know that I'm an idiot and I do stupid things. I do things automatically and reflexively, and I'm going to hurt you, not because I want to, but because I'm just going to do something that will be offensive, hurtful, insensitive, maybe unfair to you because you're another human being. You're going to do the same thing to me. So first of all, we trust each other that we have goodwill. We trust each other that we're doing this, in a good spirit. Not that we're perfect, but that we're perfectly imperfect, and that we're prepared to repair, fix misdeeds. We put the relationship ahead of the self. The relationship is what protects the self. Therefore, if you feel I hurt you, then I fix it. That's what builds trust. What erodes trust is the human tendency for all of us, to protect our own interests under stress. That's everybody. And what we're trying to teach people is how to be really good at taking care of each other under the most stressful circumstances. Otherwise, we always revert to our own self-interests, and that is adversarial, and that leads to war. And that's what we want to teach people, that all human beings have this proclivity, and we have to watch out.
Right. So what you're saying is like that trust is like knowing yourself and having faith in yourself and your partner to overcome the challenges by being committed to the dialogue, to like a process of repairing with each other. So it brings in like the sensitivity, which would be attunement to each other, of watching each other, giving each other like the benefit of the doubt, like you said, like recognizing that like most of the time when we hurt each other, it's very unintentional. Like very rarely do partners intentionally hurt like their partner. Usually it's because like Stan was just saying that they're scared and they're self-protecting. And then they go into that mode and like the outcome is pain to the other person at the cost of the relationship. And then I think about like respect. It's respecting your commitment that you've made to your, like committed to yourself to be with this person, even when they're being less than desirable to be around, as they do the same for you, knowing that sometimes I am, with my husband, less than desirable. I get irritable and, make all sorts of mistakes, but there's like a respect that we have towards each other. And then the couples that we work with, I help them with that mutual respect. But I want to say something about like respect when it comes to parenting, because like kind of going back to what we said at the beginning about how when two people become parents, they don't really know what they're doing. I think respect is really important, how you can respect your partner as they make mistakes as a parent, but basically just learn how to parent, like try all of these different ways to soothe the baby, like bouncing, burping, changing a diaper, busting out Dr. Harvey Karp's like 5 S's. Like you like allow your partner, as long as you're sensitive and attuned to them, like they don't need relief from you, but they want to stay engaged to figure it out, to build that confidence that's so important in early parenthood, is building confidence from actually parenting. To like, oh, I can do this, like my, baby was upset and I was able to figure it out after multiple attempts. I feel like that's a level of respect too, that is really important in early parenting, of like respecting each other's learning curve. Like I know like when I was struggling with Jude, it would have felt very misattuned if Charlie would have jumped in and like been like, do this. It would have been, it's such a vulnerable time. It's just like, and, I like appreciated that mutual respect and really leaned on that. And we wanted to highlight that in Baby Bomb about like allowing each other to make mistakes in parenting, and allow each other to make mistakes in partnering too. Mistakes are great. I mean, that's how we learn,
Yeah, to think of it as a team, the model here is what people do when their lives depend on each other. Other things that are differences fade away. They have to do things for the mutual good. If one person goes down, the team suffers, right? And so this is a team of two. Neither of them are experts. They're both improvising, they're both learning, and they're both working out the best possible solution at any given time for now. That's going to change because conditions are constantly changing with child rearing. And so again, the couple is a team. They're always doing the best thing that is possible in the moment, given their strengths, right? Given their opinions or ideas, given their common vision to have a child that is healthy and emotionally intact and a good citizen, all those things, right? They're working together. And that's, I think, the main thing about the book is a couple reorienting to a two-person system of teamwork, fully collaborative, fully cooperative, with all the mistakes and bumping up into each other that they're going to do, but they have big things to accomplish. And people sometimes really do sweat the small stuff.
Why do you think it's so common for couples to grow apart, even though they're sharing in the joy of raising a child together?
In my experience, the couples can be predicted to grow apart when they are drifting or when they have a tendency to drift. And these are generally people who we consider on the avoidance side of the attachment spectrum. People who are on the avoidance side have a tendency to drift. And by that, I mean lead separate lives, be siloed in a particular way. And whenever people do that, they stop influencing each other and they start getting influenced by outside elements. It's just natural. And they'll drift and they'll start to get interested in other things. They'll start to find that they're pointing in different directions eventually. And so that's very predictable drift. And that can happen with the first child. They stop being a couple. They stop being lovers. They stop being best friends. They stop working together. They divide and conquer. They start to assign each other certain roles that are not really collaborative, but are basically outsourced. And they don't understand that they're setting a course that if they follow a logical line in terms of trajectory, they're going to eventually dissolve.
Yeah. I think so. I mean,
go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to agree with Stan. I was like, yeah, I think like different attachment styles definitely like play into it. And also, I mean, having a baby, especially like the last 2 years, having a baby during the pandemic is like a very resource demanding endeavor. And so it's really easy for couples to put their relationship on the back burner and just try to make it through the day. And I think also there's like a simply like not knowing that there's another way to do it, because maybe that's what they witnessed, like their first family, like their parents doing, is divide and conquering and outsourcing all the things that Stan just mentioned. You know, they grew up with that and they think, okay, this is what you do. And like, and also like, you know, there's the whole culture part about like mothers, like thinking, I talk about this with other mothers. I talk about this with my mom. I make decisions with other mothers. I make decisions with my mom. I'm not inclusive to my partner. I think like some of it, and again, like, I think like, that's why we wrote Baby Bomb, is because for anybody who didn't know that there was another way to do this, just because of not having had that experience, we wanted to show people there is another way to do this. If you want to parent in a very, like Stan was saying, shared power, collaborative way with your partner, where you're building something new. And this is, having a baby is such a great opportunity to do something like that. Like you can do that. You can practice it on a day-to-day basis. And it doesn't matter if it wasn't modeled for you. Let us tell you some ways to do this. Practice it. Talk to your partner about it. Hash it out between the two of you. See if this resonates with you, if you like it. We really wanted to empower people.
Yeah, as I step back and look at the bigger picture and incorporating some of the things that we've talked about, because we started out by pointing out how vulnerable it is to bring a child into your world. And even if you think you know what you did with, let's say, child number one, like child number two could be totally different. So it's this constantly evolving thing. And if you as a couple aren't really prepared to witness each other's mistakes and vulnerabilities, and you're in this high stakes situation where you have a life on your hands and you got to get it right, you know, even though you won't, then it's like the perfect recipe in some respects for pushing people apart or making people retreat a bit from each other into like a zone of safety where they're not offending each other necessarily, but they're also missing out on the impacting each other that will keep their relationship vital.
Right. Like if the relationship's not safe, people still need safety. So they will find that by themselves or with somebody else. I mean, we need a sense of safety. So if the relationship isn't safe because there is misattunement, because if there's shaming or criticism or absence, you know, we will find that, and that will cause a drift in partners.
Yeah, one of the things that I think you do really well in the book, and I have to say that with all the books that I've read, I've gotten to a point where I tend to not like anecdotes in the books, because I'm just like, come on, like that didn't really happen. You just made that up. But one thing that I really like in Baby Bomb is the way that you describe situations and how they might unfold in a way that that would lead people apart and create more pain, more anger, more hurt. And then you offer them a redo of sorts in the book, so that we get to see how that particular dialogue might have unfolded were people to be putting some of these principles into practice. Were they able to truly attune to each other, to truly see each other? That's one aspect of the respect that I think personally is so important, is being willing to pause. To respect someone is to like give them your attention and to be willing to see them as they are and to work on accepting them as they are. So I love how in your book you give all these vehicles for allowing people to stop in the moment and recognize, like what you were saying earlier, Stan, like people are trying their best, even if it really doesn't seem that way, to kind of realize that in the moment and find your way to each other before things go off the rails. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could talk a little bit about developing the ability to attune like that when you've got another little person, that talk about throwing the neurobiology a bit askew, when you have another little being in your life who's screaming or whatever, and then you're trying to like actually attune with your partner and come to some sort of agreement about what's going to happen in a particular moment. It's complex. So what are some of the hints that you offer for people in those circumstances?
So we have nervous systems, right? Nervous systems that respond to internal and external stimuli. A baby making noise and crying is certainly going to create arousal in both partners, particularly the primary. The primary is wired for sounds and is more inclined to be more reactive. But make no mistake, it doesn't matter. The two adults are the big tuning forks. Their nervous systems are intertwined. Where one goes, the other goes. Now you have a little tuning fork that's making all this sound. There's a tendency for the big tuning forks to start to argue and to start to fight because of the alarm systems that go off into the brain and body. And so basically we want the sound to stop because the crying or the screaming is a threat cue. It happens to be a threat cue that the primary moves toward instead of other threat cues where you move away, right? So first things first, the couple has to be able to calm each other and the baby. There are lots of ways of doing that together instead of dividing and conquering. They can do that together and be with each other fully present, fully attentive, at times split, but still coming back. They can soothe the baby together, just as they can, in adulthood, face the children together as a couple, that they are the big bells, they are regulating the small bells. Put a couple in the front of a car, put kids in the back of the car. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, because everyone's facing forward. Nobody can regulate the kids in the back, and they're going to make a lot of noise and drive parents crazy. There are ways of predicting that, and there are ways of working so that the parents are okay, and then they manage the children. But first, they put their oxygen masks on before they take care of the children. It's a very hard thing to do because it's intuitively not what we want to do. We want to take care of the noise. We want to take care of the emergency right away and not do it thoughtfully, right? So again, this is thinking. This is understanding. It's not simply intuitive. It's understanding how people operate. These two people have to be in each other's care first, and then they care for baby. That can be instantaneous. Mm-hmm. It does. It's, you don't put the baby in the closet while the parents regulate each other, right? It can be done at the same time, but it doesn't occur to people because when we hear an alarm, we react, and we often want to shoot the alarm or the person who is reacting to the alarm. That's a human thing of threat, right? And that's what we're trying to help people understand. We're threat animals. We do things automatically that are in our own interests, but not in the interests of the greater good and the team. And that's something people have to plan for, predict, and they have to understand, fix. You make a mistake, you put something in place for the next time because it'll happen again and again, right?
Yeah, there's so much resistance, I think, in our culture anyway, to making mistakes and making allowances for mistakes. And so when you're in a high pressure situation like an inconsolable child, then I think it can be tempting, like you're saying, to just I just want to fix this problem and, oh, you're not doing it right. And so and there's all this inner panic that can arise for people, which could either result in someone in their panic leaning in too much, or someone in their panic needing to get the hell out of there, which of course you talk about in terms of how people's attachment styles impact how they show up in these moments.
Dictatorship is easy. Partnership is hard. Mm-hmm. It is. Collaboration is hard. People are too difficult, right? I can do it myself. I can do it better than you. You're not doing it right. I'll take over. And that is a problem in the team, right? That's not a two-person system. That's a one-person system, which we all default to under stress. Mm-hmm. And that's the single biggest problem facing human beings. Under stress, we default to a one-person system, which looks very threatening to the outside world.
Mm-hmm. Right. Looks threatening to every other one-person system.
Every other one-person system. Right. And that creates consequences. Right. And then you see consequences building and spinning out of control and accruing to where people then find it hard to get out of this thing, this threat response that's reflexive and keeps building. That's why repair is so important. I'm sorry I did that. I'm sorry I yelled at you. That was wrong. I should not have done that.
Repair, and then also being friendly during these times of high stress. I think Neil, what you were just saying, the baby starts crying, both partners or parents, their nervous systems activate. And that could be a time that they fight, or it can be a time of intimacy too, by just even a glance and a softening of the eyes and you got this. I know you can, I know you can do this, this being soothe the baby, that encouragement of the team.
That's a big wow.
We will come back to this, whatever it is that they're discussing, but just communicating verbally or non-verbally or both, we are on the same team. We care about each other. And this is a difficult moment. And we're going to be allies in this moment. And that can be it can be taught, just kind of doing a contrary action of leaning in. And I'm just thinking of times when it was I was feeling all of my alarm bells were going off because of my son. And I can conjure up right now my husband's face and the softening of it and how much strength that gave me in that moment. I mean, about our partnership, but also to be able to, okay, I can do this, and then to come back to Charlie and be thank you for having my back and helping me in that moment and helping our relationship, ultimately too. But it doesn't have to be these grand gestures of we're going to figure everything out. I really think about a softening in a face, a smile, a touch, putting a hand on the knee, a hand on your shoulder, okay. All of those little things mean so much during these times of stress.
Yes.
They're everything.
Kara and Stan, we have to just take a quick break to talk about this week's sponsors. Now, as weather starts to get colder, a perfect way to end a long day is getting cozy and curled up with a good show. However, if you've run out of cool things to watch, that could be a problem. That's why I've really been enjoying my trips across the pond with this episode's first sponsor, Acorn TV. Acorn TV is the largest commercial-free British streaming service featuring compelling stories, exclusive premieres, and originals you won't find anywhere else. literally hundreds of exclusive shows from around the world, including award-winning mysteries, dramas, and comedies with a quirky, unique sensibility all their own. While I've mentioned Jack Irish, and some unusual comedies like Detectorists, which is about the ups and downs of some members of the Daneberry Metal Detecting Club. It's pretty funny. I also enjoyed watching My Life is Murder, which stars Lucy Lawless, whom you might remember as having played Xena Warrior Princess, as she goes about solving murder cases in Auckland, New Zealand. There's just so much available to you that's, well, just new and different compared to what's available on other streaming services. And you get access to all of this new, different content for just a fraction of the cost compared to most streaming services at just $5.99 a month. And as a Relationship Alive listener, they have a special offer for you. You can try Acorn TV free for 30 days by going to acorn.tv and using my promo code, which is ALIVE. You have to enter the promo code all in lowercase letters, just so you know. It's case sensitive. So that's ACORN, acorn.tv, code ALIVE, in lowercase, to get your first 30 days for free. Our second sponsor has been back to help you get the support you need from the comfort of your own home or your office, or actually anywhere you are. Their name is BetterHelp, and I'm excited that they're continuing to show their support of Relationship Alive. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can chat with them via text at any time, and you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, all without having to go anywhere. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available for those who qualify. They also offer a broad range of expertise so that you can find the person most suited to helping you with your own unique situation. So whatever you're going through, whether you're new parents or trying to work out how things are going with the children that are have been in your lives already, or dealing with stress or anxiety, anger, trauma, whatever it is that's going on, try out BetterHelp to help you move past the places where you might be stuck. To start living a happier life today, you can try BetterHelp, and you can get an extra 10% off your first month for being a Relationship Alive listener. Just visit betterhelp.com/alive and join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/alive. And thank you to both Acorn TV and BetterHelp for your support of the Relationship Alive podcast. And now let's get back to our conversation with Kara Hoppe and Stan Tatkin. Yeah, and you talk about how people can, in less stressful moments, talk to each other about what might actually comfort them in a stressful moment, so that they can offer that to each other. And then you also talk about the tells. Kara, maybe you could talk a little bit about your process of figuring this all out with Charlie. I'm assuming that you had it all figured out ahead of time, what your tells were, how you were going to show up for each. No, I see you shaking.
No. I mean, we were solid. We were a solid couple and team, and parenthood threw a lot of curveballs to us. It was a whole nother level of vulnerability and of needing to really team up, level up our marriage that I didn't anticipate. And the journey to do that, that is what Baby Bomb is. That was our journey to do that. And during the process of doing it, luckily, Stan had been my friend for so long. I'd studied with him, and so I started bringing all of the stuff that he was really talking about, that nonverbal, knowing each other's tells. Before Jude, Charlie and I we could take it for granted that we could read each other. We read each other great for that moment in our marriage. But then when Jude was in the mix, it had to be even better. So we had to get more specific, about how, the things that are soothing to me, which is touch, which is reassurance, it's not the same for Charlie. Like for him, like verbal reassurance goes a long way. And it like, and being like I can say like small pithy things to Charlie that are attuned to how I know Charlie and nobody else knows Charlie that can carry him. But I had to really like not just like, it's not relearn, but reinvest maybe and deepen my knowledge of like what that is for Charlie. And I noticed as we were doing it, kind of like coming back together, after the explosion of our baby bomb into our lives, like how intentional it could be, and how knowing that, like I said, it's these little moments would really carry. Like I could see if I did like one thing in the day that was really attuned to Charlie in just the specific way he needed it, that his attitude for the day would just be different. Like he would show up for me more. He would show up for Jude more. And I remember being like clocking that, like that worked, So I'm going to commit to doing like that worked for both of us, the three of us really, and like, I'm going to do that often. And I noticed Charlie doing that for me, like how he would do the softening of his face and kind of get on my level and do the touch. And like, so we talked about it. So it was intentional, but we had to really discover it rediscover it post Jude, post baby bomb.
Can I dovetail on that? Because I've seen them grow. I mean, they became a very tight team and because they had good bones to begin with, but they discovered, with load bearing comes a whole different ball game. And that's what we really want people to understand, this idea of leveling up. Off the factory line, the average human being is not going to handle load bearing very well. Relationships will not last with the average human being because we're energy conserved. We do the least amount possible. We operate according to what we know, what we've experienced from childhood. That's about as fancy as we ever get. This calls for much more awareness, much more discipline into people raising the bar on what is going to be the right thing to do when it's the hardest. What is the right thing to do when it's the hardest? We're constantly doing that. It's a matter of purpose and character that we're setting that bar because we know as human beings, we will do the least amount necessary and we will always default to our own interests. That's how we roll. And if we go down, everyone's screwed. If, generals are fighting, soldiers die. If parents aren't getting along, the kids suffer. And so this is vital that this couple learns how to handle this third thing, which is load bearing. But it's not the only thing because there's COVID, there's financial downturns. There's all sorts of things that are going to hit us as we move through time. And if a couple is not really a good team and not working well, the wheels will come off. Mm-hmm. And that's not a function of him or her or they or them. It's a function of the team. They're not really a team and they don't really see it correctly in terms of their lives depend on each other. They have to work together, full stop. They can make mistakes, but they have to fix it and move forward and to know what their purpose really is and that it's not based on love. It's based on purpose, right? This is what we do. This is what we never do. And the testing ground here is this first child. Mm-hmm. It's one of many.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if we can get specific here and talk about a couple things that I think are pressing issues for a lot of couples in the midst of child rearing. And that's what can happen with sex and also the concept of balance and fairness or equity. Parity in a relationship. Maybe to keep everyone listening, let's talk about balance first and we'll talk about sex after. But right, those are the things where it's like people can feel siloed, like, and I've experienced this, when my kids were young in particular, just that sense of like, wait a minute, I'm doing all the blah, blah, or when was the last time you, etc. And feeling like things get all askew. And sometimes that's even done from a with a positive intent where a partner might say, oh, well, I'm good at this and they're not so good at it, so I'm just going to take that all on. And that could be parenting related. And you talk about kind of parental gatekeeping in the book, where you're like, I'm just going to do all the parenting stuff. But the ways that excludes your partner from being a team player, a collaborative with you. But that could be true of anything in that domain. It can get so out of whack, and then people get really resentful. So what's a couple to do when they find themselves in that position?
Well, I mean, you bring up a couple of different things there, Neil, because like immediately when I was thinking about, like, a lot of couples do that scorekeeping, you know, like, but I'm immediately, when the couples that I work with, or when this happens to me in my own marriage, I think like I go like a step below, like what's happening? You know, what needs are not being met here, that like all of a sudden I'm like tracking this, or couples are tracking this. Like, I mean, it's like it manifests as a feeling of inequity, which maybe it is inequity. It certainly can feel that way, but also like what needs aren't happening. Is there a lack of connection? Is there a lack of emotional attunement? Is somebody not in the relationship, especially when it has a new baby, able to care for themselves? Do they have time to exercise? Are they able to like have a few moments for themselves? Like when that's not happening, I think that the scorekeeping can happen more so, because it's just instead of, you know, we're so trained to like this isn't fair, and it probably isn't, you know, but it's so hard. I think people have a hard time identifying like like the physical needs, or even like below it, like our emotional needs. Like, I need to be seen right now. I need for you to stop what you're doing and attune to me and see how difficult parenting is for me, you know? And a lot of that happens like early parenthood, you know, for birthing people, it's very difficult on the body giving birth. And then if you're breastfeeding, that's very difficult on the body. And a lot of that is invisible, like certainly culturally it's invisible. And then it can be invisible in the relationship. And then when things are invisible, it can feel like nobody's appreciating this. And rather than being able to have that conversation of like, I notice I'm feeling insecure because I'm feeling unappreciated by the culture at whole, and then by you, that I'm like generously sharing my body with this person and completely tethered to them. And then you're asking things of me, like it becomes like, it can become like a scorekeeping thing. So I think helping people recognize, like, that's why we have that whole chapter on needs, like helping people like connect with like, what are their physical needs, their spiritual needs, their emotional needs, you know, their needs for connection, not just with their partner, but with like their outside support, with the greater community. All of that's like shifted in early parenthood. I mean, especially early parenthood during the pandemic, when it was like so isolating for new parents trying to protect their babies from and themselves from COVID, you know, but like all of that really can deplete people. And I don't think people are necessarily attuned to that. And then it manifests like sideways.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Just going deeper to this question of what do you need that you're not getting? And then you get the opportunity to say, well, is this thing that I was worried about, is that really the issue? Or is it something deeper? And I'm struck by, in your book, there were many times where I was like, of course, what a couple needs to do in a situation like this is step back and be like, what's really going on here? Right? Because a lot of it kind of boils down to that. People either kind of spin out in whatever's happening emotionally within them, and that, as we've talked about already, tends to drive people apart. Or they can like take a breath or see that something is actually happening with their partner. And I realized we didn't really define what a tell was here, but a tell is that you offer often nonverbal cues, but sometimes they can be verbal cues about your emotional state. So you offer those to your partner, and your partner offers those to you. And the more well-versed you are in knowing those things, the better you'll be at understanding either your own emotional state or what's happening in the person across from you. So there's this opportunity when you see something going on to step back and be like, wait a minute, like what's really going on here? Is this really about the, who's getting the laundry done right now? Or is this really about how I'm late for dinner? Maybe it is, but maybe on a deeper need, it's not about that you're late today. It's about that I don't feel seen by you, or I don't feel like you appreciate what I'm doing. And if you stopped and appreciated me, I wouldn't care how late you were, as an example.
Right. Totally. Right. That's the paradox of it, right? If you give me like what I need at a deeper level, then the other stuff isn't quite as important,
Right.
Yeah.
But see, if we were in a relationship, you and I, Neil, if we were doing this, it's my job to keep tabs on you. It's my job to make sure that you're getting your needs taken care of. It's my job to make sure you're absolutely safe and secure at all times. That's self-preserving, because if you're not, I'm going to feel the consequences of that. So if I'm doing that and looking at you and watching your tells and looking to see what you find most soothing that I can do, you're doing that with me. We're handlers of each other. That is the proper way to do it. Not to for me to ask you what you want all the time, not for me to ask you what would soothe you, but for me to know you, just like I'm learning the baby. I don't ask the baby, what do you want? I have to intuit. I have to find the baby in the baby. I have to find the baby in Neil, and Neil has to find the baby in me. And our jobs are to minister or to serve each other. This is how we get taken care of. And so it's more than just the techniques. It's an understanding. It's an orientation that we are in each other's care. And that's the way it works. It works best that way. We serve each other, and this way we get served. So I'm responsible for being your handler. I'm responsible for knowing how you work.
Okay, so we have to talk about that a minute before we talk about sex.
Goes into that too.
Underlying all of this, I think, is this sense of operating from a place of generosity. I'm going to generously pay attention to you, attune to you, create safety for you, care for you. And hopefully you're doing that for me as well.
Or we'll have a problem.
Yeah, I wouldn't say hopefully. I would say
it must happen.
It must happen. Both partners have to jump in equally into the deep end. Otherwise, this doesn't work.
Nope.
Right. So because this is so important, and because I think a lot of people listen to this show because they're not in a situation where both people are being generous. Mm-hmm. How would you approach that in your relationship if you felt like, well, I'm doing a great job paying attention to so-and-so, but I do not feel that being reciprocated?
Then we have to have a come to Jesus, sit down and say, this is, you're not somebody I want to be in the foxhole with. You're not somebody that makes me feel safe. You're not playing the same game I am. Let's talk about what we want. And are we really on the same page? And if we are, you got to start doing something.
Yeah, I guess it's like, Stan, what comes up for me hearing you say that, it's really being accountable to the choice that you made in being a partner with whomever you picked. It's like practicing accountability every day, even when you don't want to, just like we all parent every day, even when we don't want to. We all partner every day when we don't want to. I mean, that's because you're making an investment in something bigger than you.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, like, we talked about this at the beginning, and I just want to say it again. I think a lot of people don't have that kind of partnership, not because I after saying accountability, then in the second breath saying no fault of their own, I feel such a generosity or empathy towards that, because if you didn't know that it was possible to do this, how would you know? And that's why it's so important, that I really appreciate the opportunity of being on this podcast to be able to talk about this. Like, this is not the first family I was modeled or my husband was modeled. Like, we didn't see our parents sharing power equally and caring for each other equally. I didn't know that was like a possibility. So any listeners listening that don't have this right now, it doesn't mean you can't. You have, you know, do like what Stan said, like talk to your partner. Like I would like to talk with you about maybe doing this differently than we have before. This is how I think it could benefit us and our children. If, you know, what do you think? Let's discuss this idea together and see if we can, if this feels like something that could work for us, and kind of holding it in the sense of like, we're pioneers. We haven't seen this. We don't see it very much in the culture either. And so, but that also doesn't mean it's not possible. It entirely is. And this can be learned. It doesn't have to be modeled. And once you learn it, then you're teaching your children it. Then they grow up and they're like, well, this is what I think I think relationships are supposed to be fair. And you're not being fair, well, then we got a problem. You know, it's a different orientation, and parents are in a very unique opportunity to make some really big rippled changes, you know, for their children, future generations, and for themselves. And like I said, I feel like really hopeful about it, because Charlie and I learned how to do that. And Stan and I, for like our, you know, in our clinical work, this is what we do with couples every day, is help them like little step by little step by little step, make these changes.
And I can say with confidence that there is no other system that will work. There is no system that's sustainable. If anything is too unfair, too unjust, it won't last. If it does last, that's when people are miserable and unhappy and trapped. There is no way to sustain a long-term relationship unless it is absolutely fair and just and collaborative and cooperative. It can't work. And it never has worked across the history of civilization, whether it's a company or whether it's a community church or a community or whether it's a country. You know, as soon as people are feeling that there's a have and have-nots, people start to rob and steal, and people do bad things, and people fragment and split off, unless there's a dictatorship. Right. And so here we're only dealing with two people. What's their excuse? What's their excuse for not working in a way that's collaborative and cooperative? There is no excuse, actually. So it's not an option. It has to be done. It's hard. And I can attest to that. Every day it's hard, you know, but it is worth it. It is absolutely worth it.
Kara, I liked what you said about how pointing out if someone doesn't have the idea that it's even possible, like talking about it as a possibility. And second, seeing it from the perspective of this will benefit both of us. Here's how this approach might benefit you. I could see that in any system where there's kind of a war for resources, that part of why that's happening is because people don't believe that they're going to get taken care of if they're not fighting, right? So being able to depolarize in a way, and see how, like actually, if we are working collaboratively, if we're being generous with each other, that's like a positive feedback loop where things get better and better. I would imagine that most people in that more conflicted situation, they feel it. And in my experience and the experience of people I've worked with, I think, and people who listen to the show, it is that sense of, well, we're here and we don't entirely know how to get out of it. We don't know what the path forward is.
People would know if their lives depend on it. If bullets were flying over their heads, they would know. People that I've worked with that are homeless or people who are mentally ill, they do it. They know their lives depend on each other. They do not have these fights. People in war-torn areas, people who are in the foxhole, people in the military have to worry about the partners to their left and right. They don't worry about this stuff. They know their lives depend on each and every one of them. They understand what's important. In the couple world, this is non-existent. The couple is the only union that doesn't seem to get it, that this is not a luxury. This is actually, their lives do depend on each other. If they thought about it, they would get it, but they don't think about it because they think this is their childhood home where they can do whatever they want. No, this is partnership. This is us together against the world. The war cannot be in the foxhole. That's simply self-harming, self-destructive. Period.
So I'm hoping it's okay if we go a couple more minutes, because we do need to talk about sex. And I think this is a good place to be talking about it, because this could be one of those things where, Stan, as I was listening to you, I was thinking, yes, of course. And that's why a lot of people split up, because they think, well, this isn't working for me anymore. And if you're in the foxhole, you can't be like, I'm out of here. Like, I'm joining Germany or whatever. Like, you're going to get shot. But if you're in a marriage, these days, at least in the Western world, you're not going to get shot if you leave your marriage. And in fact, you might think that you're going to have better luck getting your individual needs met without that person, which may or may not be true. Sex is one of those areas, right, where once it starts evaporating in a relationship, if sex is important to a person, they may start to feel a certain kind of desperation around, like, whoa, what? And there's nothing that can potentially put sex on the sidelines, like having your infant co-sleeping with you, as an example. So let's take the last few minutes that we have together and just talk a little bit about how to keep sex and intimacy, physical intimacy, how to keep that also in this realm of two people being generous with each other, particularly with a new little one around.
I have a lot to say about this, but I'm going to yield first to Kara.
You do have a lot to say about it. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. I think about this a lot. I've been writing about it a lot of articles lately about sex specifically, and because people are desperate to hear about it, because there isn't a lot of talk about how much our sex lives change after having a child. For birthing people, there is potentially birth trauma. There is healing that needs to happen regardless of trauma. Sex might need to be redefined after having a baby for a while. It might not be like penetrative sex. And it's going to be different. And so, and this is a very tender area for people, understandably. And so, I think just having like a conversation about it in of itself, so people don't feel alone and shame about like our sex life was destroyed, or we have sex only like a handful of times since our child was born. I mean, the research says that that's like the majority, and this goes down both genders. Both genders are saying like after the birth of their first child that they're feeling sexual dissatisfaction. So if that's happening to you, you're part of the majority, first of all. And I think it is because like, for example, with birthing people, I do think that the birth in and of itself is so important to talk about it with your partner and with others, and have a healing experience within your own body, however that baby came into the world. That's really jumped over. If we think about like for birthing people, that they get one appointment at 6 weeks, that's like, okay, now you're ready to have sex. It's not intimate in and of itself. It doesn't recognize what happened to your body and what's happening to your body continue to. And so then they come home and like, they're not talking to their partner about it. And that in and of itself can make a divide. And I think that there's a lot not talking about because they simply don't know that it's helpful to talk about it. Like the non-birthing partner checking in on the regular, not specifically about sex, but about the birthing partner's body. How is your body? How are you feeling about the birth? Like how is the healing journey? Can I pour you a bath? Can I do things to help your body physically? I mean, that really helps. I mean, that's intimacy right there. That's going to build trust. I'm seen here with this person. I don't have to hide that I just had a baby, which that's what our culture wants us to do, is to pretend we didn't just have babies. And then we're like, I got my body back. I got my sex life back. I mean, that's completely, irresponsible to not just birthing people, but to couples. When both partners are impacted by this, even the non-birthing partner is impacted by this, when it's a completely unrecognized event. And so I guess by recognizing it and really empowering a non-birthing partner to know how to be attuned. And again, this wouldn't be by instinct. This is where like psychological education comes in. By knowing ways to help out their birthing partner feel at home and safe in their own body again. And appreciating their body, not asking them to go back to the way they were, because that's asking a birthing person to do something that's impossible. Their body has changed. That body is done. It's over. There's a new body that both partners can get to know together. And that's the journey there, right? And that's not necessarily, and that's sexy. That's redefining romance. You have a new body, and so does a non-birthing partner's bodies are always changing. I mean, we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, time is moving forward, and we don't have to fight that. We can, be inclusive to that reality and really be attuned to that reality and support it and support finding a new sex life again. However that looks like, to both partners, that is inclusive of both partners' needs enough, the need to heal and the need for touch, it's important for both people. So
yeah. I'm really appreciating what you're saying about how the actual physical experience of birthing is and what happens after that is overlooked a lot of the times. And I think what I'm hearing in what you're saying that really is standing out for me is what an opportunity it is if people are not letting, say, too much time go by, but if they feel into the fact that, okay, we actually have a responsibility as partners to foster our intimacy and to recognize that it's going to be different now, but that doesn't mean we're just putting it all on hold. It means now that there's a baby here, as an example, we're going to find ways to still give each other pleasurable experiences that actually match where we are currently at, where we're not trying to be what we were prior to, but where we're actually paying attention and attuning to each other and asking, what would feel pleasurable to you? And it may be that a birthing partner needs a bit more restorative time than the non-birthing partner. And yet I still am hearing that there are ways that they can show up for each other that offer them a deepening of intimacy and finding pleasure in new ways while they recalibrate based on all the changes that have happened.
Mm-hmm.
I will condense what I was going to say into just this one thing. Growing up and moving through time is about being able to grieve as we move towards greater complexity. That means that we're constantly adapting to the realities of life. We are in the present moment. We are what we are today, not what we were yesterday and not what I thought I had. That is how we move through time together. And we're in the present moment, making love for who we are at this moment. It is not about sex per se. It can be about orgasms, but this is about making love. This is about two strangers who will always be strangers, constantly trying to get to know each other, and that's lovemaking. And that takes two adults knowing that they're constantly losing things as they're gaining new things. But are they aware of what they're gaining, and are their eyes on the ball, or is it always looking over the shoulder into the past? Mm-hmm. That is the big mistake that most people are making.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Well, there's, as always, plenty to talk about. And I think, Stan, this is maybe even one of our shorter conversations. Yeah. But, if you want to hear more from Stan about how attachment theory plays into all the things that we've been talking about, then definitely go to neilsattin.com/baby, and I'll have a list of all the other episodes that Stan and I have done where you can dive into that. In the meantime, you've been listening to Kara Hoppe and Stan Tatkin talking about their really well-written and simple, easy to follow, but very practical book, Baby Bomb, A Relationship Survival Guide for New Parents. And Stan and Kara, would you each mind mentioning, if people want to find out more about you and your work, where can they do that?
Sure. Thank you. Come to my website, karahoppe.com. You can find me at Kara Hoppe on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. I'm on all the socials, producing content to take these complex ideas and try to make them applicable for couples. And then I'm also teaching retreats based on the book for parents, expecting parents and parents of all ages, to practice these principles and bring them into their partnership. And that's on karahoppe.com as well.
Great. And just Hoppe is spelled Hoppe for people looking for karahoppe.com. And take it away, Stan. Where can people find out more about you?
And if people want to reach me at the PACT, PACT Institute.com. If you're interested in training as a therapist, we offer trainings around the world. If you're a couple and you're interested in couple retreats, my wife, Tracy, and I do couple retreats, again, around the world. That's where you can find me. Also, Dr. Stan Tatkin, anywhere on social media.
And it is a pleasure to have you both here with me today. Thanks so much for taking the time to share your collaborative wisdom about how to survive and thrive in a relationship when you've got little chitlins in the mix.
Always a pleasure to be with you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for listening to another episode of Relationship Alive. If you like what you've heard and want to make it easier for other people to find out about us, please take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and to rate and review us on iTunes. If you have questions or comments or want to continue the conversation, you can always join our Relationship Alive community Facebook group. And for more information about today's episode, visit us online at neilsattin.com/podcast. Or you can always text the word PASSION, PASSION, to the number 33444 for more information. Finally, do you have a burning question that you're hoping we can have answered here on Relationship Alive, either for a future or past guest? Let me know and I'll see what I can do. Take care and see you next time.